back with another tandem streamer. This time I'm going to tie up the New Brunswick Special. This fly obviously very popular in Canada. So I've started some white 210 thread. Just going to snip off the tag here and grab my monofilament. I've got a 30-pound test piece of monofilament. I'm going to slide this under the hook eye and secure it with my thread. Now just bind this down nice and tight, working my way up towards the hook eye. Make sure the orientation of the monofilament is straight up in the air, not off to the left or the right. You want it in line with the hook shank. If it's sticking up in the air, that's fine, but the left and the right orientation need to be correct. And you can come in and hit this with some glue right now, and that will just help to bind the monofilament to the hook shank a little better, make it a little more secure. Alright, I'm going to come in with some flat silver tinsel, tie this in at the hook eye, and all the way down to the barb. Nice even touching turns. Now I'm just going to bring this thread back up. I'll throw a couple half hitches in just to secure my work so the thread doesn't come undone. And I'll start wrapping my silver tinsel here. Just touching turns. Some people like to overlap. I like touching turns. And when you get up here to the hook eye, just take some turns over the material to bind it down. And snip it off. And throw a finish in there. Snip off the thread and put the front hook in. Alright, we're making pretty good time here. So I'm going to start my thread, same thread, white 210 UTC thread at the hook eye. Work my way down, making a nice base of thread on the hook shank. This is an important step when you're doing tandems, is to evenly wrap a base of thread. That way the monofilament isn't directly touching the hook shank, because if it is, it has a tendency to slide down to one side or the other, and this thread base helps keep everything in place. And I'm just going to wrap my thread back up to the hook eye, and at this point you can apply some glue. I didn't get that step on camera, but this is a good time to do that. So now I'm going to come in with some silver tinsel. I'm going to tie this silver side down. This is two-sided tinsel, so you guys can see the gold side showing, but when I flip it over to wrap, it will be silver side showing. Whoops, mind the point of the hook here as you get down towards the end of the fly. Okay, so everything looks good. I'm just going to take this thread back up to the hook eye. Tie it off. And wrap my silver tinsel forward. Even touching turns. Sometimes I like to take my index finger and just roll the material underneath and towards me. And that just helps to keep the tinsel tight. So up here at the hook eye, take a few turns in front and behind of the material and snip it off. And I'll adjust the hook orientation here to get it riding straight. Now the next material is going to be some white bucktail. So I'm going to grab a natural undyed bucktail. This is a main buck. So I'm just going to pull out all the short fibers and all the extra long ones as well. And then I'll come down with a sparse clump of this white bucktail, and I'll tie it in underneath. I believe the original pattern was this bucktail was actually tied in on the top of the hook shank. So just a few turns over the top there to secure the hair. Come in with the scissors, snip off these butt ends. And now we can move on to the wings. So I'm going to need 4 orange rooster saddle hackles for the wing. And for the shoulder, I'll need 2 golden pheasant tippets. So one side of the wing will be constructed like this. 2 orange feathers on top of each other. And on top of that, a golden pheasant tippet. And if you wish to glue all 3 feathers together, that does make it a little easier to tie in here. So here's the opposite side. So now I've got both sides made up. I guess I'll tie in one at a time this time. So I'm going to tie this side in. And then bring the thread back to the rear of the head. Now I'm going to come in with the opposite side. Line up the tips of the feathers here. And the shoulders. And take a few loose wraps forward. And then start applying a little bit of pressure. And take the thread back to the rear of the head. And take a look. Alright, that looks decent. Everything lines up. The shoulders line up and the tips line up. So I'm going to bring my thread down towards the hook eye and just use my fingernail to bend these stems backwards. Come in with my scissors and snip off these butt ends very carefully. Alright, I have to switch my thread up to some black. So to secure this white, I'm going to take a turn in front of the hook eye and then in back of the clump of stems, and I'll whip finish. That just gave me something to bite into before I whip finished. Now I'll snip this off, grab some black thread, UTC black thread in 70 denier. Just going to wind this on just enough to cover up all of the white thread. This pattern actually calls for Junglecock nails for the eyes. I tend to omit Junglecock nails for this pattern because, as you can see, it is a very bright fly already, kind of an attractor pattern. And I just don't think that it needs the Junglecock eyes. If you're just tying this up as a working fly, as a fishing fly, it is a very bright pattern. It's certainly not going to go unnoticed. So my personal opinion is that the jungle. There is a poll in one of Don Wilson's books that he pulled from, I think, like Field and Stream magazine, probably about 50 years ago, where anglers did a test. So they trolled flies with Junglecock eyes, they trolled flies with painted eyes, and they trolled flies with no eyes whatsoever. And the Junglecock eye flies performed the poorest and accounted for the least amount of hookups throughout the day. The painted eyes accounted for the most hookups, and no eyes whatsoever came in the middle. So Junglecock eyes, they look great to us humans, but they're not necessary on every pattern. I tend to save mine for the more natural colored patterns that maybe need a little spice, or I save them for my show flies. So I'll whip finish this head, come in with some head cement, put a coat of that on, let it dry, and then I'll come in with my final coat and really make this shine. Looks like I got some gunk in the hook eye here, so I'll just take a stem and clean out all that glue. And in case you were wondering what it would look like with a Junglecock eye, here you go. You know, it does look really cool. The orange and the black stripe in the Junglecock feather really do complement the golden pheasant tippet. But as I say, for fishing, it's just not necessary. So here it is, guys. The finished New Brunswick Special Tandem streamer. Really great pattern after ice out, and it is also a very effective fly in the fall. I tend to throw these in the fall more than anything. The brook trout in my area just go crazy for orange in the fall. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, or I hope you were inspired. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Keep a hook in your vise, guys, and good luck out there this year.